So thank you, Julia. So we're here today to listen to Nikolai from Our World 2050. And we got together, I can't even remember how we got linked in with each other, probably through Gwyn or someone. Um, and then I spoke to Nikolai and their project just resonated. And it's all about raising the voices of the future generations globally to understand how they feel about the climate in future. And if that's not truly at the heart of ASP, then I just don't know what is. So we were happy to support, and we've been sharing the survey that the kids have been doing. And so this is a kind of beginning of their research, and I'll pass over to Nikolai so that he can take it from here and fill us in on the details. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Michelle. Thank you for the introduction and hi to everyone. First of all, thank you for inviting. I'm so excited that now we are part of ASP, and it all started, I guess, last summer, or like yeah, last summer, like half a year ago. I was sitting in a hotel somewhere in the middle of the US, and suddenly this guy Gwyn popped up on my LinkedIn, and so you are perfectly right, Michelle. That's where it all started. We set up a call from my hotel room. We loved each other, fell in love immediately. Everybody, I'm sure, falls in love with Gwyn immediately. Uh, and we agreed to follow up and talk about how we could collaborate. We met you, Michelle, and Julia, and now you can say the rest is history. Here we are, half a year, down the road. So thank you so much. It feels good to be here, and I can say before I move into Our World 2050 kind of story that this is. You can be very proud that you're here. This is a world premiere of really, talking about our analysis. It's not the first time I talk about our world, but it's the first time we actually really present a deeper insight into what the next generation is telling us based on our survey. Coming back to that pretty soon. Um, and it's a world premiere also because we are a very young organization. I guess when we met last summer, we weren't even registered. So bear in mind that we are building, and that's also what I hope for when we reach the end of my presentation, that we can even discuss and chat about how do you see this, and how might you be interested in joining forces on one thing or another. And even, questions and so on are more than welcome. If we don't get through everything today, then, in dialogues after. And if you notice like a slight accent, it's because I'm from Denmark, it's Copenhagen. Uh, I'm calling in from Boston, where I live currently, despite the special times in it's this side of the of the river. Everything is good here, but on a normal day, I would be calling from Copenhagen. Now living in Boston with my family. And if I sometimes look a bit confused, it's because I have my kids also. Today is a snow day, so yeah.
Very normal for ASP members.
But everything is about the kids anyway, so I think it's just great. Great. So let's see if I can manage to actually move the slides here. Yes, here we are. So won't dwell too much about myself, but just for your background, I've been working in the space of sustainability for the last, I keep saying 20, it's going to be soon 25, I guess, years. Was founding, that's where it all started, the Danish clean tech cluster called Clean. I headed that for years before I started my consultancy, basically advising in sustainability stuff in many different countries, particularly in the global south, in Asia, but also Europe and North America, with big and small kind of projects and clients and so on. And then I emphasize, first of all, I'm me. People talk so much about titles and achievements and stuff, but that's what I really, both when I advise entrepreneurs, but also speak with kids who are you? So I'm a father and I'm a husband, I'm a son, I'm a child, etc. I think that's what we all should remind each other. Also, especially when we talk about this topic. So here I am as myself, so to speak. Um, I thought, and we talked about that in the team, the ASP team. That mean, what should we put on the menu? Basically, so first I'll start, by telling a little bit more about our World 2050, and then we'll dive into some of the numbers that we found. I mean, during our first from our first survey. And then I would really, really love us to have time to also, all of us, be part of a more kind of interactive discussion about why it's important to include children and youth, and how can we best include the next generation, stuff like that. But we are coming back to that. And I guess the house rules are not many. Jump in if you have questions, then we'll consider and keep watching the clock. I mean, see how much time do we have, and we might or might not create some breakout rooms, or we might just keep it in plenary. Let's see what happens, so to speak, and what we feel like. uh, Great. So, but actually, just very briefly, I thought, I mean, of really inviting all of you to open the chat. It's always good to have a sense of who we are, not only for me but for everybody. So, if you could just, and I'll do the same here, open the chat, and and then just type, which country you're from, and what organization, if any, you're calling from. That'll be fun. Spain, US, UK, Portugal. Yes. Soon Scotland. I love it. Hamburg, Germany, France. Great. Fantastic. So thank you so much. And actually also would be good to have a sense of your role. So if you also want to type, the role you have today, if any, you might also just be interested in the topic, but maybe you are an educator, NGO, working with policy, working with youth, etc. So please feel free to open, also type that in the chat. Wow. Also, we have Uganda and Hungary with us, I see. Fantastic.
Oh, there's a great mix there.
Yeah. What a mix.
Nice.
And I can say I do know some of you. I mean, I see you, Bridget, here. It's good to see you. Many of you have seen. Thank you. Good. So I think, we don't have to type this. This is also like a small, reflection of what made you interested in the webinar. I guess when I see where you're from and what you do, etc., we don't even, I guess it goes without saying, but um, no, this is great. What a great group we are. So I think I actually want to see you. Here we are. I want to see you again here, so I can actually see your faces. Good. So yeah, so before moving into what our World 2050 really is, I thought of reminding myself and everybody that if you look back, I mean, there are so many great stories out there about how young people in different parts of the world actually just got an idea and decided to take action based on something they saw or dreamt about or hoped for. So to not go through everybody here, I mean, but Malala in Pakistan, I guess many of you heard the story. When she was 11, she began fighting publicly for girls' right to education in Pakistan. Boyan in Holland today, a pretty famous guy. When he was 16, he started this plastic initiative, which is today operating globally. Greta Thunberg, we all know her. Amazing what she have, pulled together. Gitanjali from USA invented this device to help detect lead in drinking water. And William, maybe you saw the documentary from Malawi, we're building like a windmill from scratch to power his family's home in rural Malawi. So I think this already tells us, that the young people, they do have, a lot of ideas, a lot of drive. And I think this is basically before I even enter the Our World 2050 story, this is what we want to, you know, you know, push for and enable many more children and young people to actually embrace. So the challenge today is basically, if you look at this whole space of youth and children. I mean, if you look at the numbers, there's more than 3 billion, sorry, of 35% plus of the world population. They're either children or youth, but actually don't really have a lot of impact on shaping the future. And if we ask them, and there are several kind of programs and organizations, doing that, sometimes at least, and I saw some numbers that more than 70%, I think this was a UK study, said, I mean, yeah, sometimes we get, included, but we don't really feel that whatever we say is actually taken to the next level or being taken seriously, which actually creates this kind of sense of, disappointment or really a feeling of not being taken seriously. At the same time, I guess they, as well as we as adults, are really surrounded by crisis narratives. And we see a lot of anxiety among young people and really the feeling of not being able to do much about it, which creates a lot of paralysis. And at the same time, really, we all know that we need new perspective, more creativity, more change makers to take action. Good old Einstein, I said, we cannot solve the problems we created with the same thinking we used when we created them. So from that perspective, it's pretty interesting that we don't actually listen and involve the young generation more than we actually do. And we can turn that around and ask ourselves, so why do they actually matter? Why do children and young people matter? And I guess the simple answer is really that, as we all know, I guess, in the room, that they actually challenge status quo. They are just really, thinking, straight from the heart instead of being, involved in economics and politics. They imagine without fear limitations of what's possible or what is naive or what is realistic, which I think is really powerful here, really thinking out of the box just from their heart. And actually, really, if we start early enough and we manage to actually open their eyes and empower them from the young age, I guess we increase the likelihood of actually creating a generation of motivated and confident change makers who wants to make a difference. And by the way, they will soon be the next decision makers and CEOs, etc. So I guess it makes a lot of sense to actually take the young generation a little more seriously than we do. And I think together in this room today, we are all kind of on the same page. So it's really interesting to talk about how do we then do that. Right. So to zoom a little bit more in on, and by the way, if you have questions, I don't necessarily see the chat here, so just jump in. By the way, if you have questions or comments along the way, because I'm talking a lot here. um, anyways, I want to take you back to where it all started, like a little more than a year ago, where I was attending the New York Climate Week, like some of you probably were also. And I looked around, and some of you heard this story before, and looked around, and I didn't really see a lot of young people in the different plenary sessions and panels, etc. And if there were youth, sessions or events, it was mainly the youth being there, and there was not too much intergenerational kind of dialogue. And I drove back on the, I sat back on the bus back to from New York to Boston, where I live currently, and asked myself, how do we actually really give children a voice and actually include them better? Because I also heard a lot of repetition, like 20 years in a row, from all these conferences, from all the great, people. Which is great. There's like the pension funds and the companies and the politicians, etc. But they also, or we, I should say, also tend to repeat ourselves and talk about the same kind of solution. So why don't we actually really invite in the next generation? And that planted the seed or the acorn for for what now became, our world 2050. So really our mission and what we do is basically three things. So first of all, the headline is we want to give a voice to children from all corners of the world by inviting them to share stories, dreams, ideas, and concerns, really to understand what takes up their mind, what are their ideas and dreams, what are their concerns, who are they? They also, what do they think based on where they are? That's one thing, to listen. The second thing we want to do really is to empower them, and what we want to do is really in what we call our first pillar of our activities is really to work with the children on location at schools, in clubs, etc. Really to give them some tools for expressing their ideas, freeing their imagination. Numbers are telling us that the human imagination actually went down 30% after the invention of the smartphone. So how do we even free that imagination and from there start, imagining and expressing the future we want? Because the good old, if you can imagine it, you can create it kind of narrative really is important here, and through that kind of trainings, we also bring in tools in terms of how to turn anxiety into future hope, and because we all know that if you don't believe in something, you don't do much about it. If you really believe in something, like for instance the future, you're also more likely to do something about it and to engage. So this is where we want to equip children with both listening to them, but also equip them with tools for taking action. As I think you said, Gwen, at some point, we are not going to tell them what to do. We're going to listen, and then we're going to equip them with some tools for how to actually then bring ideas to life and engage in creating the future they actually express, they dream about. And then in what we call pillar two, really we want to collect a lot of voices. So far, we launched like an ambition of analyzing and collecting 1 million young voices over the next 3.5 years. And you can ask why many, why so many? Some people would even say it's not a lot compared to how many young people we have in the world. But we emphasize the many because we want to really wake up, as we internally call the dinosaurs, the decision makers, all of us, in terms of what are the next generation, what is the next generation telling us here, what's on their mind, so we actually better understand that, so even politicians can make better decisions, but also the rest of us can actually also be inspired and think out of the box. third pillar, didn't put it here, is obviously, as any nonprofit, like it's awareness creation. So how do we spread all this? It's going to be through, of course, campaigns and social media, conferences, exhibitions, and so on. Again, not only to bring the kids' voices to the table for the entertainment part of it, but for the serious part of it to actually wake up, all of us, including the decision makers, and to also build agency in the kids, making them feel listened to by the older generation. Some of the outcomes we have in mind or are working on is really, just some examples here, like an annual State of the Children and Youth report. Of course, obviously, educational material goes without saying. If you have a global ambition, you have to tailor educational materials to different age groups and cultures and so on. We're creating a data bank. That one is already being developed because we are getting stories in from a lot of kids as we speak. And then, of course, awareness and engagement products like photos and videos and testimonials and stories, etc., to actually, spread these insights from the dear children and young people. So when we are asked basically what gets out of it and why is this important for different kind of, segments, you could say, we have this kind of pretty kind of, I guess, crisp and clear kind of explanation. One thing is, of course, first of all, to build agency in with our children and youth, future hope, optimism, and so on and so forth. But also local ownership. I guess we see a lot of hackathons inviting kids and youth to work on challenges defined by people like me, whereas we think it would be interesting even to include them in defining what they see as the challenges, and by that create bigger ownership to actually working on those challenges by having co-defined the challenges themselves. Tools, methodologies, etc. So that's about the kids. But then we get a lot of questions from schools, local municipalities, local communities. Had a meeting just last week with the local town I'm living in, the town of Winchester here. He said, "What's in it for the school, and what's in it for the local municipality if we are to engage the municipality and the school district in this, what's in it for us?" And I guess the short answer is really, apart from getting, a program that can be integrated in the current curriculum, to actually create, great, engagement with the dear kids. It's also really, I guess, interesting for a local town to actually support the creation of a generation of young change makers locally who are actually motivated to engage locally. Then on the higher in the decision makers, we could call it like the UN and WEF and others. I guess what we hear already, for instance, from WEF, World Economic Forum, they actually are interested in the inspiration and insights that the next generation can give us to actually make better informed decisions. And again, nobody what's not to like in terms of creating a generation of young change makers. And even the private sector, this is not really what we focus on, but some told us, oh, this is really interesting also for the private sector to actually learn about what the next generation is is thinking here. This is not something we yet really do much about, but at least it's interesting to keep in mind. So far, and as you can hear, we are very young. We are still fundraising. We are still building, but we did a lot so far through great, individuals and organizations and partners that we already have partnered with. So one thing is we have a survey. Going to come back in a second to some of the results of that one. So we actually already engaged more than 1,000 children before we have a penny, in terms of really getting their stories. I'm coming back to that. we have spent a lot of time on pressure testing this and reaching out to interesting partners, talking about our wonderful partnership with ASP. So really, the approach is here not to do everything ourselves, to train all these kids to fly around in 192 countries and to meet with 1 million children. No, the model is it's on the opposite, really to build with existing organizations like almost I was about to say a cluster organization as I came from. You could hear in the back in the years, really building on who is good at doing what they already do, but then as our World 2050 really being the one who coordinates across and makes sure that more than today are actually collaborating in this field, learning from each other, inspiring each other from teaching materials, and also with local partners, having access and understanding of how to actually work with schools locally, how to get inside a classroom, how to actually access the kids. That's where we have partners like, for instance, among the big ones, Plan International, as many of you will know, who already work in 75 countries worldwide with kids, especially girls. We have Climate Cardinals in New York, who already have 16,000 volunteers working in non-English speaking countries as we speak, who likes this, and so on and so forth. We are building with partners who already have access to kids, but also not least, experience and knowledge in teaching and in how to really work with different age groups in different cultures and so on and so forth. Then we established a youth ambassador corps. We thought it was even though I'm still so young, we thought it was very important to really get like a group of young people who are closer to the youth we are talking about here, who understand them better, who knows the language better, and who also, from a local point of view, in different countries, Australia, Indonesia, UK, etc., really have a sense of what's going on there. Also have a local network there. I see Australia is there twice. That's great. It's very important. Organizational setup, we also spend a lot of time on that. So we have that in place with our fiscal sponsor, bank, legal setup, etc. It takes forever. Any of you who ever tried that can not to that, but mission completed. And then we settled like a great advisory board where we have really, some great members also, counting also a guy from the World Bank, the co-founder of One Earth, Plan International, as I mentioned, and Cardinals, and so on and so forth, and the website and SoMe. And all this we've actually been doing behind the lines before we're even, have much economy. And this is really based on so many great people, organizations, volunteers, and the youth ambassadors who each, help making this happen as we speak. So as we speak, we're moving into our pre-pilot, where we have learned a lot over the last almost a year here. So now we're actually moving into the phase of really establishing the secretariat, which is so far me, but we are like a handful of people who are actually working a lot on this. So shaping that secretariat is what we do right now. Building the data platform, which very soon requires more kind of resources to actually ensure that we can both reach the many, but also do it in a right ethical way, talking about data security and kids' data. So there's a lot of regulation there, obviously, that we have to be very serious about. Methodology and materials, tailoring that in dialogue with countries and organizations in pilot countries, formalizing partner agreements, and testing this. As I mentioned, we already do that in a handful of countries: Nigeria, Kenya, Uganda, and a few more. But really, in our pre-pilot phase, which is this year, really, getting the foundation a little stronger and testing the first stuff before we actually start, the real piloting, because it also takes a lot of fundraising to actually then and budgets to actually then run into the pilot, which is then planned uh, for the coming 3 years, where we're going to roll out in what we call, 5 regions in one region in each continent, based on honestly where we have the best network and foothold. So right now, we have Kenya, Uganda. I've been doing stuff in East Africa for the last 20 years, have a big network there. Obviously, we are building on that also in Malawi, in Nigeria. In Asia, Indonesia seems to be where we start building, one of our partners. And advisory board members, by the way, from the UK, Michael Sweet from Derby University has a lot of foothold there. And Plan International also has big interest and activities there. Europe, obviously the UK, but we are open for more countries, obviously. North America, the US, that's where I am right now, and Latin America, again, based on friendships and contacts, Colombia and Mexico. Also, in the real, we still call it pilot, that's where we're going to collect those 1 million voices, analyze them, build the first comparable data set in the world, really focus 100% of the different concerns, etc. And so on and so forth. So just to give you an idea of where we are, I guess I'm already mentioned our structure. So basically a very decentralized structure where we have a small secretariat, a couple of people. We have a very cool advisory board with global presence. We have our youth ambassadors. And then, first and foremost, we have our lovely partners who we see as the implementing, bodies here. So even talking budgets, this is where the majority of the budget will be channeled down to existing organizations who already are present in different geographies or have key topic expertise in a field, and then build on that. That's what partners mean here. So really having this decentralized organization where the implementation happens primarily through our partners in different parts of the world. I don't know. I don't see the chat with. Now I wanted to move into a little bit of the data based on our survey. But
That's
at this
fine. The,
point,
the chat is loving everything. So, yes, yes, 1,000 times yes. Great involved. The chat is all loving everything. So, moving on to the surveys, perfect.
That's great. Fantastic. Thank you. I know I'm talking a lot, so hopefully you are equipped with coffee and feel free to stand up and stretch your legs and shout out and sing a song and so to speak to keep on your toes. But okay, thank you, Michelle. And so let me move into a little bit of the data. And this is where we now have our world premiere of looking into the numbers based on a little more than 1,000, answers from kids actually all over the world in 20 countries. So first of all, a little background. So what we did, and this, you can hear this is all things that happened even before we had a penny. We decided to actually pressure test the concept and see what happens if we ask just, basically the kids all over the world a few questions. And this is even strong stuff for our ongoing fundraising efforts to actually use this. So what we did was basically just to send out a kind of dead boring Google form. We know it's not at all, tailored for, towards what kids would normally find on their different devices. So really just a dead boring Google form tailored to actually reach, parents and organizations working with youth to make them actually engage their kids. And we were a little surprised that actually so many found it, although we've been bragging a little bit about it on LinkedIn and stuff. So we basically just asked very simple questions like name, just first name, country and age. And then we asked one, I mean, our main question is basically very basic. It goes like, imagine the world 2050, describe the life and world you hope for. How does it look? How does it feel? What are people doing, etc. What, an open question where you can write long or you can write short. And it's completely blew us away that kids down to 6 years and up to 21, they have a lot to tell us. So we get some very long replies here. After that, and it's on purpose that we don't put them into like a box of, climate or sustainability or war or money or anything. We just really ask very openly without putting any topic to it. And it's really interesting what comes in this open question. After that, we ask them like a few short follow-up questions where they can more like tick off different opportunities. So first one really, do you believe in the world would be a better place to live in than today? What are the most important things for you in the future? Do you have any worries about the future? What would you change if you could? And these are all kind of multiple choice questions to make it easy. So we didn't want to bother. We all know that who everybody who tried to make a survey, keep it simple, right? So we sent this out and held our breath, and we were actually blown away when we saw how many replies we so far got in. It is still open, by the way. So median age 16, but we actually have replies from also 6 year, 6, 7, 8 year old kids who, with their parents or by drawing it, sending us drawings, has also responded to this. So from 6 to 21, that's the target group, and we so far received replies from 20 countries, which makes us very happy. Both from developed and developing countries, and basically more or less all continents. Thanks, by the way, for those of you who have helped spread the word, because I know some of you have been helping us doing that. Is incredible. So let's start a little bit with the dreams. I think that's also where we really want to start. I mentioned, this whole dystopian, narrative that we all hear every day, and I forgot to say that before. We really want to turn that narrative into an optimistic narrative from the point of view that if you believe in the future, if you believe you can do something, you're more likely to do something. So we really want to underline the importance of creating that future optimism. And we spend a lot of time explaining that this is not to be naive and to forget about the troubles or the challenges. No, we should definitely respect that. But if we all sit in a corner and don't, and just shaken by opening the news, it doesn't really lead too much. So we really try to turn it around and say, yes, we know, but what can we do? What can I do? What can you do as an individual? Because we can all do our part every day. I guess that was Jane Goddard who said, every day we wake up, we have a choice to actually act. And so what do each of us do, right? So this is really also why we want to start with the dreams. So a few quotes here. I'm not going to read them like one by one, but it's really, the keywords are really about the kids want people to be happier, less stressed, have better relationships, equal rights, play together, addressing successfully having addressed climate change, social inequality. A lot of kids mention nature as something very important, and animals. Many mentioned also wars and peace, and many, without mentioning names and countries, talk about better leaders, and less fighting and less conflicts, and more respect for one another, including our differences. So that's really the world that if you look at it, our dear kids and youth dream about. So that was a number of quotes, and we can actually accumulate based on all these answers, we can accumulate the main themes, really, standing out based on the long first answer, about the future they dream about. We can accumulate that in these kind of categories. So peace and equality, like a desire for a world without war, racism, and so on, social oppression is something that many mention that they dream about, equal rights for all races, religions, and genders. Um, uh, Kind and honest political leaders. Then environmental sustainability, and remember, we haven't, mentioned, much about climate or sustainability, in this first question. It actually pops up really as something that our dear young people really emphasize as part of their dreams, a cleaner, greener world. Um, we have solved climate change, that I mentioned before, reducing pollution, clean air, clean water, renewable energy, vertical farming, and so on, biodiversity. Then, no surprise, technology and AI pops up as something that really takes up the minds of, and actually also makes the dear kids, really creative. So they talk about, smart homes, flying cars, robots that can collect waste on the beaches or in the oceans. um, um, so a lot of, jobs have been taken over by AI. AI plays a role in learning, in science, in medicine. But they also, feared a little bit. Coming back to a little bit about that a bit later here. Improved quality of life and work really is important across, developing and developed markets. Um, Life with less stress, more time for hobbies and family, community, work-life balance. I think that's where it tips a little towards, in the developed markets where that is really popping out bigger. Purpose-driven jobs, which is really, also, one of the words that comes up often. Healthcare for all, education for all. And that speaks now to the last one, education and learning, also being really an important part of what what the next generation is telling us about the future, the world they dream about, where everybody basically have access to education and learning. Um, so this is basically, yeah, just a graph, like you're summarizing really how it's the different, different themes come up. So this was a question about what's the most important thing for you in the future. I'm not going to go through everything again, but a healthy planet really pops out. Safe and peaceful world, enough food, water, etc. Um, Freedom, nature, family and friends, going to school, stuff like that. Then it actually becomes interesting if you divide, if you split up, and look at different age groups. How different do they reply depending on how old they are? And here, I guess apart from from seeing here I mean, they somewhat agree against, across age groups. Still, the older group places a slightly higher importance on environmental health compared to the younger group. But both groups really prioritize basic needs and social life like food, water, money, home, family, friends, uh, really indicating that fundamental human welfare is a top concern for all our both kids and youth. Then this one is really interesting, I think, not only because it's a very simple picture, but because it really has a strong message. So this simple question, as I mentioned before, I mean, do you believe the world would be a better place to live in than today? If you look at the blue colors, you can say yes, it's actually most do. But then look at the light blue 39.4 kind of piece, which is actually representing the group of almost 40% who says yes, but only if people start making better choices. So this is really important, I guess. So around like one fourth like believe yes, it's gonna be better, and then 40% believes yes, it's going to be better, but only if we do something differently here. And I think this is a very strong message. And then you see the other pieces of the pie here. Somebody don't know, around 11%. 10% says no, probably worse. And 11% says, humbly, maybe a bit better. So I think this is really a strong message. That should wake up, a lot of current decision makers, so to speak. Um, so again, if you split this in age groups or across age group, really you can see that older respondents are a little more conditional in terms of yes, we believe it's going to be better, but only if we make better decisions. That's where the older, where the youth are more leaning into that reply. Whereas the younger responses are a little more outright optimistic about, yes, it's going to be much better. That's basically almost 30% of the youngest who says that. But also, interestingly enough, I think that a lot of the younger respondents show, uncertainty. They really don't know, they don't know what to say, whether it's going to be a better world. So this is an interesting. Also, then if you look across developed and developing markets, I think it's also interesting to see some differences here. So developed countries are a little more conditional. If we ask them whether it's going to be a better world, I mean, almost 43% in developed markets say yes, but only if, but it's almost the same percentage in developing markets. The bigger difference is, that in developing markets, many more say yes, it's going to be a much better world, whereas only 10% say in the developed part of the world says it's going to be better, which is kind of frightening that only 10%, almost 11%, think it's going to be a clear yes, much better kind of world. And almost 20% say no, probably worse, in developed markets. We're soon there. Don't worry. I know it's a lot. So a little bit about priorities for the future. Looking also at, developed and developing countries here. So the responses from developed countries really prioritize the environment more than those in developing markets. I think that's natural because in the developing countries, basic needs and social life obviously are top concerns, significant, much more than those in the developed countries. And then again, safe and peaceful world or security is higher in developing countries. I think that's also kind of no surprise, but still interesting to get it confirmed here. A little bit about the worries. I think it's important to also observe the worries, also because as we move forward as our World 2050 and keep collecting voices over the next year and years, it also becomes interesting to see how does this develop next year. Is it the same worries that take up the minds of kids? I guess if you asked kids today or last year in Greenland what the worries were, I guess today the worries would be different, and hopefully the worries will be different again next year. So it becomes interesting to also, from a benchmarking point of view, how do we actually move and in the best case get rid of some of these worries, and to do that we're going to understand what are the worries really, so we can start talking about how do we want to change that into something better. So some of the worries here, these are some quotes really. It's about, disconnection, people surrounded by information but starved of meaning, community and touch. I guess the dear, smartphones and screens are, probably a symptom of this. A future where we talk more to screens than to each other. That's really a fear, and I guess that's already, you know, a debate as we speak, right? How much should the screens take up, of our attention here compared to, you know, meeting each other? Another quote here, really about the future, is conflicts, war, insecurity, misuse of technology. Climate change pops up in this other third quote. People not caring for each other, bad government, lack of electricity, water, and toilet systems. That's very, still big issues. I know from all my work in African countries. Um, Politicians is a worry in itself, and politicians who blame other people for the country's problems, um, uh, and um, and even also worrying about being able to actually follow or sponsor my dream, as one of the young people say here. And then artificial intelligence. Again, we can accommodate that, and I think I just covered like quite a number of those really, topics through the quotes. But again, is climate change and environmental degradation popping up as something very concerning for kids and young people. Political instability and conflict. Social economic issues like inequality, poverty, high cost of living and stuff like that, lack of resources like clean water and food, inadequate health care, insufficient job opportunities, really. So that's really the essence of the social economic issues and inequalities expressed here. AI, again, as we saw before in some of the quotes here, job displacement, misuse of technology, negative effects of social media on mental health and human connection, spread of misinformation. I think all these are also, topics we hear about. And then human morality and leadership, greed, selfishness, lack of empathy, corruption in leadership, rise of radicalism, hoping that leaders will make better decisions, and so on. So I guess topics we all kind of hear about, especially these days in the news streams, but really interesting to actually see this is this is something that the kids actually, you know, hear and take in, and it worries them. So I think it's important to actually realize this, especially for some leaders and so on, who today seems to have forgotten a little bit about empathy and so on and so forth. Um, the last part of the world premiere here really is about some of the ideas. I think this is also interesting. One thing is the dreams, the beliefs and the worries, but really also what are the ideas? And this is to the question about what would you change, if you could, the last question in the survey. So we hear a lot of, great input here about, young people being motivated to actually fight for equal rights, fight for the environment, to preserve the environment, really work on or being promoting an idea of free water and toilets for all, free education, access to libraries for all, really, addressing poverty, hunger, and corruption, addressing social inequality, access to healthcare for all, no more wars, So a mix of ideas. And if you look into the individual replies, there's even, in some of the answers, very concrete ideas about, robots who can do this and that, and other like funny ideas where many of us would say, "Oh, I never heard that before," and I think that could be really interesting also down the road of bringing some of these ideas to the table. And by the way, I forgot to mention, also, as part of our outreach, the last year, we have spoken to so many scientists and universities who were really eager to get this kind of information, to actually, then in some cases reflect on it, and in some cases maybe even engage in calculating or developing, what could we do to make this and that happen, depending on their ideas coming in from the children. So I think this is extremely interesting also to that so many scientists actually and research institutions reach out and told us, come back to us when you have some insight. We would love to actually work on some of these kind of reflect on some of these ideas and concerns and dreams that you actually get in to actually enable us to maybe you know do some calculations or do some thinking about how could we actually bring some of those ideas and dreams to life through what we can do in our in our research institutions. So that's I guess pretty much the flyover of the data that I plan to bring today. And I think I'll stop sharing for a second here, so actually see if you're still there.
Oh.
And is everybody still awake and happy?
That's brilliant. Thank you so much, Nikolai.
Thank you.
I think given in the chat there's you could probably see the chat a bit easier now. There was a lot of appreciation for the quality of the survey and for how that might actually support others' inquiry in their own journeys with people as well into their networks. I mean, certainly my my neurons are firing about how these can be taken more deeply, how it aligns with other kind of policy necessities, I guess, to move, things into a better social space. But I certainly know
Yes.
that you would like some deeper discussion from the ASP members, so I will.
Yes. I would love that. And if there are like questions at this point of time before, I mean, I prepared a few questions, but I think it would be equally interesting if there are some, comments or reflections or questions from any of you, even before we go there. We could take that. We could take that now, and if not, I also brought a little bit of a few questions. But let's see if somebody wants to
Wynn
ask
has
about the.
raised his hand.
Oh yeah, Quinn, great.
Yeah, let's get the party started. Fantastic, Nikolai. Thanks, Michelle and Julie, for organising this. Yeah, loads of good stuff there. The first question is, how can we get this? How can we, whatever, get this fed into the actual political policy making decision process?
Yes.
That's the real, if you want, battleground, isn't it? That's the real challenge.
Yes. Absolutely. I love the question because a big part of the why is, I mean, apart from building, future hope and agency, and empower the kids and the youth. How do we actually also use this to wake up, as I said before, the dinosaurs or the decision makers, right? I think the answer will be a mix of having, of course, numbers and stories in big scale. So numbers like the ones I just presented, but also even beyond that, stories and really documentation on the issues, the dreams, etc. And that's where the big numbers, like talking about 1 million kids, also become important, I think. So we can actually say this is just not just a small pocket or a small pilot somewhere. This is actually a big comparable study that actually shows that this is, dreams, etc. So to your point, how do we then get it to the table of decision makers? I think again, it's going to be like probably a mix of who do we all know and inviting ourselves if for coffee, so to speak. I'm in touch now with some of the organizers of New York Climate Week. We plan to go there. Hopefully, we'll be invited to present at the New York Climate Week, where we know there are so many decision makers. I was back in the years, believe it or not, in the Confederation of Danish Industry, which is a lobby organization where it's also about finding, key people in decision among decision makers locally as well as nationally, and even in some of the big institutions. Feed them with numbers, equip them with arguments, give them numbers, and so on. So there's a little bit behind the line, a lot of behind the line work, and then there's like some speak up, creating some noise kind of part of it, which is really, making campaigns, presentations, events and so on, speaking engagements, reports, and so on, to actually create a broad awareness about this, because this is often what works in policy. If there's broad awareness about something, then you better kind of also, as a politician, also have to kind of at least listen to it, so to speak, right? So a mix of groundwork behind the lines, and public awareness, and even like campaigning and social media, and also then direct contact to decision makers.
Yeah, I just wanted to I wasn't actually going to ask a question myself, but I just want to say, thank you for the brilliant showing kind of survey results. And I love that you mentioned about kind of bringing the scientists in, and they're really invested in getting that kind of perspective and listening to it, and actually how to incorporate that. But I was just going to actually ask Lou, I don't know if you want to ask your question yourself, but Lou put in the chat, what's your vision on where you'd love to take this over the next 5 to 10 years, kind of by 2030, because it's such a pivotal kind of time and year. So Lou, I don't know if you wanted to ask any more about that, but I just thought that's quite a good question.
Love it. I really, Thank you, Lou, and I love that question. And I remember, Bridget, you also here. You also asked me that question the first time we met, and even my mentor, Megan Fraser, asked me that question. So, how do you see this? 5 or 10 years from now, right? I really see this as like, first of all, a global movement. I don't see our World 2050 as a big organization at all. I see us as a pretty small secretariat, but a huge global movement based on individuals and organizations and partners, around the globe, with, local presence, who already work with kids and youth. So also in respect of not, and I mean, I tell myself, I'm not an educator. I really want to build this on existing, organizations, educators, etc., who are on location, who really have experience. So a global movement based on existing great organizations. So I see us as, rolling out in if you say 5 or 10 years from now, in more than 100 countries. I see us having way more than 1 million voices, but maybe 10 million or more voices here. I see us as somebody who gets invited to the table to actually share with everything from the UN and others. I mean, what is the next generation telling us here, based on what each of us as partners can actually, feed into the bigger picture, and so on. And I see this as a mutual inspiring also organization where, again, now I mentioned you 3 times, Bridget, but I know we talked about, some of the educational materials you already have. How do we, build on that? How can we even, spread that and learn from each other across organizations and so on and so forth. So we actually also inspire each other on this movement, because we are all, many of us, are doing so much great stuff already. How do we actually really scale this to a bigger kind of splash, so to speak? Uh, um, and then behind that, a small secretariat that would just take care of, a little bit of coordination, probably ongoing fundraising, because this is big, but again, in partnership with many, with existing organizations. That how fundraising works as we speak, putting together applications together, and then also, if it's Africa, some partners are interested in that. If it's Asia or Europe, some partners are interested in that. If it's the US, some partners are interested in that, etc. So we actually build in different kind of clusters, and so to speak, but together we are a huge kind of global movement.
I would just like to add in, like you and I, Nikolai and I talked some weeks ago, and we shared amazing ideas. And then I'm realizing, oh my God, I haven't followed up on so many of them. So I'm wishing that we could have some kind of standing meeting, like once a month or something, of the different partners. So I know there's a deadline coming up to help me keep making progress, because I'm juggling so many things. Maybe other people are too, I don't know. But I think
Yeah.
that would be helpful to make progress faster, to know that I had that deadline in my calendar. And
Yes.
so it would help me.
That's a lovely point. I think we all have that reality, including myself. We had, like a wonderful, meeting, and none of us have forgotten. I know, Bridget, and I think that what we're working really on is, also, talking about the pre-pilot, and creating the a little stronger, foundation. Have a secretariat, like a couple of people who can, build that governance, build that, really structure. So we make sure that each of us, I mean, everybody is busy doing what we have to do every day, but at the same time, each of us wants to, tap into, like contribute to this, like something else like this. And so how do we actually do this in a smart way, which is all about, governance? I think it's a brilliant, very down to a concrete idea to invite, whether it's monthly or something like that, like a open mic, or like, no, I shouldn't call it an open mic, but we actually do this with the youth ambassadors. Those who can be there, they are there each month, and they share experience, ideas, agree on what to follow up on, who does what, and stuff like that. And I think, especially now when we are not 10,000 people, but just, a little less, we can do that. And as we grow, we'll consider how do we, do it from there, we'll split up in smaller groups based on themes or whatever, So I think it's a brilliant idea.
Yeah, I also love, how that cross-pollination of ideas, if we don't even know what we might say, that's going to trigger something amazing for somebody else if we just keep having these conversations. Like, for
Exactly.
example, I got involved in something by seeing a documentary film about the City Nature Challenge, which is a global effort getting kids and adults out in the field, taking photographs of nature and uploading them into iNaturalist. And it's been growing also like a global movement. And that's a free, simple thing that people around the world can do that empowers kids. So I'm
Yeah,
like wanting to tell everybody about it because I think it's so exciting.
ex
Just want to give
exactly.
out
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, and I think it's a wonderful point. And we don't necessarily, or we don't have to reinvent the wheel. There are so many great tools and methodologies and experiences out there. Myself, I've been working with design thinking and imagination for years, but I'm not saying I've been doing that with 7-year-old kids in Nigeria. So how can we, as you said, cross-pollinate and learn from each other, and use, build on something which is already there, instead of reinventing the wheel? And then from case to case, wherever we are, there will be something missing, and then where another partner or myself or others can pitch in, and fill that gap, and then together we can all, like, make more interesting kind of engagements of our dear children and youth. It reminds me of a wonderful question I had from the local school counselor here in Winchester, where I live. I've been bragging about the vision, the mission, the plan, the numbers. And then she said, "What does that mean for me?" And I was like, wow, I mean, thank you, because I mean, taking it from up here to an everyday teaching situation in a classroom, how do we do that? And again, it depends on the reality, on the age group, on the local school system. In the US, I can say it's not very easy just to walk in with a great idea, say, "Hey, come on, I'm gonna run this one day thematical kind of our world workshop for you guys there." Whereas in Uganda, they just asked us, "When can you be here?" Right? So it again, we have to be ready to learn from each other, to tailor it to the different, or to the local context. So something which is relevant in one context might be less relevant in another context, and then we twist it, right? I guess the main point really is, again, staying true to the mission of empowering, motivating our dear kids to gain future hope and optimism and take action. Not because we want to put pressure on them to save the world. We should never do that. But because we want them to be happy, to be, to have hope for the future, and by through that they will even be motivated to engage and so on.
I think one of the things that came up for me when I'm looking at the answers is like, how related those are to structural concepts. It's social inequality does not need to exist on a planet which has billionaires that could stop world poverty
No.
multiple times over. So when you're looking at these like structural contexts, and they're just like the children have that purity that is like, right back to how humans should and want to predominantly communicate and connect with each other. And I think that's the real power of those, of having it, written down for people,
Yes.
being able to see that. I think it was Ruth was asking about, whether there was opportunities to like use some of the, quotes from the children or things like that. I mean, I'm sure that's like data protection, blah, blah, blah. But I think there's a power in that certainly I know
Yes.
would be useful in my work,
Yeah.
and I'm sure others would like that as well.
No, but that's a very important and good point. And yeah, we have to, and we want to find a way to use quotes. I mean, one thing which is easy is to, make it neutral. So we just take out all names and and so on. We're talking to CRIN these days in the UK, Children's Rights. I forgot what it stands for. Yeah, CRIN, who are experts in data protection for kids. So to make sure that we don't want to do something wrong here, really to suddenly, apart from GDPR and stuff, we're talking about kids here, right? So there are many ways. There are good ways to go about it, and we are getting advice from them as we speak and as we build. And there are even ways to build that, whatever we call that data machine, as I call it, the collector and analysis, like AI based kind of or integrated kind of tool, which is also has to be very safe, so it can't be hacked and all that, right? So nobody else can access the data and so on. So there are ways. Thanks for and I think it's very important to also, because that's some of the questions we also get from the kids and from the schools and for parents. What happens to the data? Can I suddenly see the picture of my child, on the front page of something, right? So how do we really go about that? And there's going to be a lot of also parent consent kind of stuff in this, as when we really start, taking photos and creating videos. That's going to be, also that's the important part of it. So yes, we'll get there with getting to use the quotes and even video material and stuff for social media and so on. Great question of reflection.
Any
Great.
more for any more? So we will be sharing the recording. Oh, Gwyn's raised his hand. Yeah, go for it,
Oh,
Gwyn.
great. Oh, yeah.
Oh,
You
you're
are
on mute. You're still mute.
muted.
One comment that came up when I was doing some similar work with the local university, and of course, there's students at the top end of the age range you're at. The word cloud they created of what they want in the future, there were two words that dominated massively. One was family, which came out quite strongly in some of your responses, but travel was the other one. And what I've had to reconcile is, my life don't travel I don't fly. I actually don't need to. But when I look at an 18, 19-year-old who maybe has never left home, never left their shores, I ended up saying to these guys, do it, fly everywhere, fly out to Indonesia, fly out to Mexico, fly out to Africa. Because if you don't understand what's going on in those countries, you'll never understand the appreciation and diversity of the world.
Yeah.
But you'll be working from the wrong context if you're creating more systems. And for me, it's been really, doing this work's been really instructional, because I've got to stop what I do and what I want.
Yeah.
I'm too old, right? But we've got to and so, what did I want when I was 17, 18? And of course, we don't want them traveling every week, but that's to me an investment in their future, in their education, rather than frivolous joyriding.
Yes.
And I think, it's I would have never come across that if I'd not asked that question to the young people.
Yeah.
And I think it gives us a different context from which we need to work.
Yeah. It's a wonderful point, and reminds me of one of our advisory board members, Anne Gennari, the author of the Climate Optimist Handbook. And if you haven't read it, I can highly recommend it, by the way, because it's such a good point. As you say, she used to be really like a climate activist, like many of us have been or are. And at the same time, she realized, all this, how dare you rhetoric. You cannot eat meat, or you cannot fly, or how dare you buying straws and etc. Not that, one thing is you can decide yourself what to do and what not to do. And at the same time, it's important that we don't point fingers if somebody, for instance, travel somewhere, as you say, Gwyn. So really, I guess her point really here is that we've tried, the dystopian, narrative for many years, how bad things are, and all the things we cannot do. And if you ask her or even my old kindergarten teacher, her simplest trick was to say, don't talk about all the things we cannot do, talk about all the things we can do. And in the case of flying and traveling, I perfectly agree, that I can look at my own old kids came from Denmark, now we live in Boston. The way it opens their perspective, the way it's really, give them, make them understand that the world is not just, their local little community. I think this is extremely important, including the human connection, especially in a topic as we talk about here, with, not only because we are spending too much time on screens, but also because, study shows that the human connection and the physical meeting, even across cultures and nations, builds that understanding that makes us, more or better at, at building and collaborating and understanding and respecting, etc. So I think it's a really good point, Gwyn, that we should keep in mind, including the optimistic kind of, going away from the how dare you rhetoric to the what can you do, and if you travel, why do you travel, and what can you turn the conversation towards, yes, it's okay, and what else can we do, you maybe travel even to save the planet, so sorry, I was talking Sally and Kathleen, you both have hands, I don't know who came first.
I was first, I
Shelley
think, if
first,
that's all
yeah.
right. It was just to follow on from that. I've just sort of kept playing with this, that there's nothing intrinsically wrong with anything. Everything had its good points and its bad points. It's kind of underneath what we're getting at. And it also relates to a conversation I had with Gwyn the other day. I've just got my car back on the road and I realise what a nourishment that is to me. And it's like, it's made me change my perspective completely on that whole issue. And I think the flying is the same. You think, oh, it's bad, reject it. Life is so much more.
Yeah.
I don't know, what
Yes.
would you call it? All encompassing than that.
Yeah. Yes. No, but it's such a great point, right? And it reminds me also of one of the many conversations I have. I mean, we can all tell each other, don't do this and that and this and that and this and that, but we can keep, even if we wanted everybody to stop doing everything, it won't happen, So why don't we talk about all the things we can do instead, right? Sorry, but great. Thank you,
So,
Sally and Katalin.
thanks,
You also had a
so
hand.
Katalin is, we'll take one more question and then we'll just draw to a close.
Yes. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. So first of all, Nicolai, thank you so much for telling us about this. I think I speak for everyone when I say we feel so privileged that you shared the results with us first, and it is a really inspiring group of people as well, as you see, with so many different backgrounds and all caring about a better future for all, and having that initial statistic that you had about how many 35% of the world population, they don't really have a say enough in what will happen in their lifetime. And I think it's so often overlooked that it's such a good reminder that we need to take them into consideration. My question was really regarding the next step as well, not quite the 5-10 years as the other does, because I was looking at the mission when you were talking about it, and obviously now you're gathering these insights. I come from an education background. I'm a futurist. I work with imagination leadership as well. And I'm really, really interested in how, what you're going to do in the actual classrooms. I know you said it has to be local and you have the expertise, and I'm fully on board with that. And I just wanted to know a little bit more about that part of how you imagine the resources curated, or what kind of training you imagine, because these children will need to then have that agency, which is where we need to take the voice next, as they grow. In 5 years, that 16-year-old will be 21 and so on. So I'm really interested in the training, the education, and the agency aspect of the mission.
Lovely. I love that, Kalin, and now being mindful of time, I can say a little bit, and then probably we should we could have a follow-up call about it, because I'd love to even hear your perspective as a futurist here. So the short answer is we can tailor it like from everything from 2 hours, like introductory, like inspirational workshop, to like a course that lasts over like several months, based on where we could take so deeper or less deeper dives into the topic. The ingredients in headlines is really the tools for freeing the imagination. There are some tools for that. There's some storytelling tools. One thing is you can imagine it. Another thing, how can you express it? And then there's a little bit of entrepreneurship stuff, and based on design thinking. So if you are here and you want to go here, you can actually backtrack and say, how do we get there? And we bring in like funny stuff like Harry Potter, so every Harry Potter has like his obstacles and his enemies and his supporters, and so how can we go from here to here? And there's some like design thinking kind of tips and tricks for that. And the last piece of this short answer is that as we build it together with, by the way, Anna Ganari, like the Future Optimist, and others, and you, Bridget, etc. We are really, also, we have our stuff we could walk in with our current materials, but then we are every day even, receiving, inspiration and other tips and tricks. The teacher I spoke to in Winchester the other day said, "Oh, I'm already doing that, but maybe the design thinking part would be interesting." I said, "Great, we shouldn't copy what you already do, but we can add this little extra thing because that's what you don't have." So basically, the short answer is we tailor it, but we have a toolbox we can start from, right? And then based on the individual teacher and educator and setting, we tailor it in dialogue, right?
Lovely. Thank you so much, Nikolai,
Thank you.
for the world premiere. We always appreciate it. Thank you, everyone, for coming today. We will be sharing all the information and how we can help going forward and, decentralizing all this good stuff and more information and tools. So thank you, everyone, and we'll see you very soon.
Yeah, thank you from here too. And you will, I guess, we can share the slides. There's also my contact information. If somebody is interested in a conversation or like even talking about, how might we collaborate and so on, or like tips and tricks and feedback or even, ideas, just let me know. And I'm here also on LinkedIn and my email and stuff is in the presentation also.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for coming.
See you soon. Stay warm. Enjoy the children.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.